Welcome back. How was that? Was that okay?
That was good. I'm impressed, Gabby.
You know, we've talked about, and your son is included, Mr. Jero, because he is actually a very scary monster.
Yeah,
when you said he was going to be a monster, I thought, oh, cute, like a little fuzzy one. No, he's kind of scary.
Monster. We're going to show you pictures of the little ones
right
around
pretty
11
soon.
o'clock.
You're going to get the reveal of that. But, you know, that comes to the next topic of conversation is people are infatuated with monsters and spooky things. As you said, Jake has said that scary things and things that happen to do with kids are two of the highest grossing movies.
Print money at the box office.
Which is interesting.
Come out with a horror movie.
So that brings us to our next topic here. We have Professor Stephen Asma is a professor at Columbia College Chicago, where he's an expert on the history and philosophy of monsters and horror and has published multiple books as well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Yes, indeed.
I guess our first question is, I'm fully loaded, but why are people so interested in this topic, and why is it so exciting when you hear different stories?
Yeah, I think it's one of the oldest human concerns. Like the first story we have that humans have written is basically the Epic of Gilgamesh, and even in that early story, there's a monster. The heroes have to go and fight this thing basically in the forest. That's like a mix of different animals, and then even some of the cave paintings that we know of and figurines are sort of mixtures of humans and other animals. And I think originally they were ways of exaggerating the real threats, like we have werewolves, for example, but that's sort of in Europe where wolves really were predators. And you compare that, for example, with in Indonesia, they have a were-crocodile, and in Native American cultures, they have a were-bear. So that's the original monsters, I think, were ways of warning people about real predators in our world. And then it evolved into other stuff like, oh, we're kind of the monsters too. There's stuff in us that we don't really want to face except maybe once a year on Halloween. So it's a bigger topic than people ordinarily, I think, give credit.
Yeah, exactly. I think some psychologists might call that shadow projection, where we like to these are parts of ourselves that we project onto these scary looking images outside of our own psyche. All right, so once a year, you were saying Halloween comes around once a year. This has been so embraced not only in literature but films as well. Gabby was just saying how Jake, our entertainment reporter, always talks about how movies, horror movies, just clean up at the box office. What is it about this topic that continues to have us forking over our dollars at the box office and continuing to, like, we just spent 20 minutes telling ghost stories at the beginning of this show. Why is this?
Well, I think that the older theory was that we have fears and like difficult emotions within us, and we're carrying those around all the time. And so you sort of need like a pressure release valve. And in a way, going to a horror movie is a way to get some of this stuff out of your system. You can connect all this fear and anxiety to the guy who's chasing you with a chainsaw or whatever. And basically it allows you to sort of kind of purge these difficult emotions. That's an idea that goes back to Aristotle. Freud talked about it. And there's sort of an interesting new movement here, which is saying a lot of these horror movies are kind of a threat rehearsal. Like, maybe we're not really afraid of a zombie apocalypse, but we are thinking, hey, the grid could go down, and social, stability is very fragile. And what would happen if we're basically in a fight to survive, where our families are sort of trying to like eke out an existence against other families. And so films like this allow us to sort of think through and feel our way through some real human vulnerabilities. So same thing with like ghosts. Many of us have unfinished business with our own relatives who've passed away, friends, loved ones, enemies. And so ghost stories are a way to sort of remind us that history is never quite over.
I forgot to mention here, you're also the person behind the YouTube series Professor Asma's Guide to Unusual Knowledge. I know that we had a graphic come up. What a fun little piece of art that you have here. Tell us about that show and what things you talk about, maybe things that are really catching people's attention and you have a lot of viewership on.
Yeah, like basically anything goes. I had this wonderful podcast with the actor Paul Giamatti for a couple of years called Chinwag, and then this emerged out of that show. So we're really interested in UFOs and Bigfoot and paranormal. But one of the things that's really coming up a lot on my show is the new interest in witchcraft and the esoteric. So many of my students at Columbia College are connected to this growing tradition of esoterica, Wicca, Druids, chaos magic. They're really into it, and they've come to it online. I think during the pandemic, people found these kind of interesting communities around magic, and they really love it. They're having a ball, and it's not the kind of witchcraft you're thinking from my day. It's not the satanic panic, of metal bands and pentagrams in the park. It's really much more about self-empowerment, and a lot of the younger people are looking for spiritual ways of sort of responding to their spiritual yearning, but they're not really fans of organized religion, so they're gravitating to this stuff as a kind of self-help therapeutic approach to life. It's really interesting stuff.
Makes sense. Now, we are, in a weird time with the culture wars going on here in the U.S. right now. We hear the word witch hunt. Witch hunt. It's a witch hunt when certain politicians don't want to be investigated, they want to deflect. Is there a modern day witch? Maybe not a literal witch. We spent some time a couple weeks ago talking about our entertainment reporter, who keeps coming up during this show. He actually visited Salem, Massachusetts, and visited the museum out there. I know that was a major deal back in the 1600s or so. But how has the definition of witch evolved in the centuries since then? And is there a modern day witch that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there's definitely sort of witch hunts happening, in our politics all the time. People are sort of demonized if they don't agree with you, and there's all kinds of chasing down and sort of accusing people of being a kind of moral threat. So moral panics are very common. I would say the witches of old, like the ones you mentioned, were really very much innocent. They were oftentimes just marginal women who were very good at understanding midwifery. They could help women give birth, and they understood natural medicines. And the sort of official culture demonized them, and basically, because if the church said you were heretical, they could take all your property. So there was a kind of oppression and subjugation of these people. I'm sure that's happening now. If we look at today's situation of witches, we might be a little bit too close to it to see, but it wasn't that long ago that we had, the communist Red Scare, where Hollywood people lost their jobs. Some of that's happening now, but historians will tell us about it in 10 years from now, I think.
Yeah, it's hard to see something in real time as it's unfolding. Yeah. Sometimes it takes some time to be able to step away and look back at it as in like, oh wow, that is what was happening back in 2025.
I do have a follow-up question for some of the people who are, modern day witches, maybe at Columbia, and you said they're, practicing. What are some of the, rituals that they're doing to help with their self-expression? Like you said, they're not maybe going to a Ouija board or, doing anything super crazy.
Right. So a big part of it is astrology, and astrology is hotter than ever. I've never seen so many people interested in astrology, and that's part of the natural magic tradition. But they're also doing things like they make sigils, and a sigil is basically, the next time you're at Starbucks and you look at the barista, you'll see they have some crazy tattoo and you don't know what it means and what it is. A lot of times people mark themselves with icons or images that are very meaningful for them, like really personal. And so my students will do this stuff called sigil making, where you have something like, okay, I want to be more courageous in life, and you write it down, and then you subtract all of the vowels from it, and then you have all the consonants, then you subtract the repeating consonants, and then you use those letters to make an image. And then you have to sort of activate this image. They'll do things that are kind of fun, like, you have to burn it on the full moon, and then what they're trying to do is basically give themselves a kind of subliminal message to focus their minds. They're not thinking that this rearranges the world, to give them what they want. They're thinking this helps me to get my priorities right and to be more intentional in the world. So they see it as a kind of self-help and a way of just getting more agency in the world.
That actually makes sense. I wonder if you have anything to say about organized religion and the myths that have kind of brought us together as a culture here in the West. So in the last few hundred years, I mean, I believe it was Nietzsche who said, God is dead, right? He said that sometime back in the, I don't know, the 1800s, right? And so with fewer and fewer people, presumably, that are pursuing the traditional religions, have you seen a swelling of interest in these other traditions?
Yeah, especially among young people, people that I teach, you know, basically millennials and Gen Z, they're what statisticians are calling sort of nuns, N-O-N-E-S, which means when you mark on the demographic sheet what your religion is, they click off the nun box because they're disaffected from traditional religion, not because they're not spiritual, but because, you know, abuse in the church and fanaticism, you know, and this kind of stuff has turned them off of institutional religion. But that has led them into these other pathways, largely through online culture. But there's a rich kind of spirituality where people are kind of putting it together themselves. Like I said, they're mixing astrology with maybe Christianity. There's a great mystical tradition in Judaism called Kabbalah. There's a great mystical tradition in Islam called Sufi. So they're finding their way through, but they're not doing it through the traditional kinds of top-down institutions.
You know, I want to switch the conversation a little bit before we let you go and talk about monsters because, you know, that was kind of our peg a little bit, and we see it at the bottom headline there. Since you study monsters, that actually scared me.
Did it? Sorry,
no, that's how sorry I am.
Sorry. Go ahead, Gabs. You're good.
Go ahead.
No, is there a monster that you're most scared of? You know, or I don't know, when you're talking to your students or it comes up, is there one that just, I don't know, maybe you're more attracted to it?
No, it's a good question. There's a very small list of sort of universal phobias. Most people around the world are afraid of spiders, snakes, the dark and deep water or murky water.
Yeah.
And because monster movies take advantage of that. And so for me, it's deep water or murky water. That really creeps me out because I don't know what's down there, and my imagination just goes wild.
I'm with you on that one. I actually know of a couple of triathletes or wannabe triathletes where they train, they swim a ton in the pool, they run, they bike, but when it comes time to doing that open water swim,
they can't do it.
There's a mental block. I think a lot of people share in that with you, sir.
Yeah, I think it's there's a reason why it may have evolved this way, because this is stuff that can kill you. Like I was lucky enough to go to Africa once on safari and in Tanzania, and I noticed like everything needs a drink of water, like our ancestors did, and every crocodile in the region knows that people are coming for water. So you see these things leaping out of the water and killing the zebras and the wildebeest, and that was our prehistory. We lived through that, so it sort of makes sense that we would have anxiety around deep or murky water. And same thing with spiders and snakes.
Universal. These things are universal. So, all right.
Yeah.
Stephen Asma, professor at Columbia College, and he is the mind behind the YouTube series, Professor Asma's Guide to Unusual Knowledge. So nice to just spend time with you on this Halloween. We appreciate it, sir.
It was really fun. Thank you.
All right. Good luck to you.